Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another DADCAW. It is Saturday, the 25th of April, 11:14 in the evening. We are at the precipice of the next week, the next day, the next you, the next me. You know, every time you wake up, it's like a new you or something. I don't know. Trying to segue out of here, out of the intro. What's been going on this week? Well, we actually managed to get a DADCAW out to you guys, so there's been some progress there, right? It's been pretty delayed the last couple of weeks, I think, where I was always like behind one or something until last week, I think. I wanted to talk a little bit about maintaining habits, mostly related to similar things to what DADCAWs ended up being, which is in part a sort of recap of the past events of the week or so. Since I do these at about a rate of once a week, I was usually able to roll in whatever I had been working on or whatever lessons I had learned or whatever experiences I had had, try to roll that into some sort of thought-provoking and potentially helpful or useful or at the very least interesting topic to discuss in this. And sort of as a primer for Big Boys tables back when those were a little bit more regular, and eventually as fodder for by design or more in-depth analysis videos in the nature of by design. I wanted to talk a little bit, like I said, about keeping plans. And there is a sort of thought process that I've developed when it comes to planning stuff out. And I think for a while, it was actually not very helpful. But when I learned to, I guess, just make it work, then I could see the value in it. And it's kind of nebulous right now, so I'll try to illustrate it a little bit more clearly. Whenever I failed to do something that I said I was going to do, as particularly if there's a time limit on it, right? Like, by the end of this week, I'm going to give you this voice acting or do this map, or just in the day of, the day that's coming up, I'm going to fold my laundry. Something very, very basic and mundane in this particular example. Sometimes creative and sometimes menial, and always something that I say to myself or to other people that I'm going to do. Especially if I put it in writing or I record it in a log. As I've discussed many times, I record logs every day on a daily basis, sometimes more than once a day. If there's a topic that I feel like getting into that it's not just a daily recap, stuff like that. So usually I'll end up planning out my next day in the evening of the, prior the prior evening, right? So after this, I'll record a daily log and I'll be planning for tomorrow. And one of the things that I often talk about is what my plans are and what I actually want to do, what I want to get out of it. It's a nice way to pop in at the beginning of the day and try to iron out exactly what it is you're looking for from the experience of the day that's about to come up. And you can sort of crystallize it. And in some ways, if you also write a summary down, I find that also helps you retain it. So maybe you could use that to your advantage as well. But either way, some more thoughts for you. I definitely wound up taking that experience away from sort of like halfway through this week. I had an experience where I said I was going to fold my laundry. So the mundane experience of folding your laundry, it wasn't actually just for shits and giggles. And I never did. I still have not folded my laundry, as a matter of fact, and that was like halfway through this week, like I said. And I realized that while it's not great that I didn't fold my laundry, there has been an improvement in my psyche when it comes to sort of contextualizing that and I guess conceiving of how, what that means and how you're going to operate now that you've realized that. So in the past, I used to say, make much more grand plans usually, but also just in general, if I didn't end up keeping my word when it comes to those plans that I made, and I didn't end up achieving the goals that I set out to achieve or that I said I was going to set out to achieve, I would oftentimes use that to further the negative experience that I was having, negative psychological experience or emotional, psychosomatic, whatever. So I always ended up saying like, oh, well, it's just another case of me not doing what I said I was going to do. In a roundabout way, anyway. That's what I was doing to myself in so many words. That was the narrative I was constructing, saying that I was not capable of doing it, or I was capable, but I didn't do it, and that makes it a shit show in that respect. Stuff like that. So as far as I'm concerned, this is an area where you're actually doing something that's making you weaker. saying words that are making you weaker. Obviously, it's the narrative that you're telling yourself. Usually you're not opening up about this sort of thing to other people, but especially when it's happening, right? But those thoughts don't help you, really. They provide you with like ammo against yourself in a way. And it's not very positive. It's not a very positive experience. And it doesn't really reinforce you, make you resolve to do better. At least back when this was a problem many years ago. Now, it was something that I've very regularly found myself doing is I would say something, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, whatever. Don't do that. And as a result of not doing that and reflecting on the fact that I should have been doing that or should have done that, I ended up beating myself up over for it and wound up just perpetually not doing that, I suppose. Whatever the thing that I said I was going to do got a lot harder to do after I failed to do it the first time. Instead of just being a bit more realistic and saying, all right, well, got carried away doing something else. It's still a priority, so I better do it. And if I don't do the thing that I said I was going to do, then X will happen, right? I don't fold my laundry, that basket stays full, and then I start making a dirty laundry pile instead of putting it in the laundry basket. And so then my room gets messy. And then I'm passively more stressed out because I have a messier room. And, you can sort of follow the chain of events that could or have happened in this case, but could happen if you don't do whatever it is. And by bringing it back to a more, I guess, objective sense of if X, then Y, a more causal connection, you bring back that logical element of it. And it's more like, well, now I have a reason to do it. And, I've reminded myself that it's important. And I guess what I'm getting at here is, in addition to recording the log that I have to record after this DADCAW, I will also be folding my laundry. That is what I'm getting at. But, having that clarity to realize that obviously it's going a little far to bring it into, measures of your personal merit. I'm not saying that I was ever considering myself a worse person because I didn't fold my laundry or something like that. But there is some aspect where you beat yourself up over something because you didn't do something. You feel guilty about not doing that thing. That ends up eating away at you and making you weaker again. And maybe it's not a super pervasive issue. Maybe it was never the top, in the top 10 issues that I had or whatever. But conquering that particular aspect of my personality and then instead, again, turning it into a more logical thing where you realize like, well, this is what's going to happen if I don't do this, and restating its importance in a way, finding its importance once again. That is a better way to sort of negotiate with yourself and say, well, this thing that I didn't do, perhaps I was avoiding it for a reason, or perhaps I simply forgot about it. But in any case, I didn't do it, and it is important because of X, Y, Z, and I should do it because if I don't, then X, Y, Z will happen, and so on and so forth. By reminding yourself of all of that and taking it more of a realistic approach to it, instead of worrying that you're not living up to your potential and getting too psychologically embedded into it. Again, because of the nature of the example I gave with folding laundry, it seems very silly to extrapolate it out in this sense, but I know from experience that this can happen even with mundane things, but especially with things that are bigger. So, I've just learned to control that in a different sense, right? And refocus on it and use it in a way to say, well, I finally did it, even though I did it later than I said I would. And being able to use that for free happiness in a way, which is an old reference. Those who are in the know will get that one. Modstream wisdom, you know what I mean? So, yeah, all in all, I actually have another thing that I wanted to talk about, link directly back to the concept I just discussed. It's not quite the end for that folding laundry thing, but recently I rewatched not rewatched, but I accessed my Netflix account for the first time in months, maybe a year, maybe at least a year. And I watched the second season of Altered Carbon. And Altered Carbon was an interesting, thought-provoking show in the first couple episodes of the first season, and it quickly became very silly. And it's definitely a lot sillier now as well. Really, I guess you could say that show jumped the shark. Definitely ceased being believable. But the particulars of the show are not super important. I just wanted to set the stage that I actually have consumed quite a bit of media in the past 2 or 3 days. I think I watched 8 episodes, and each one of them is about 50 minutes or so. So, yeah, almost an hour for each one. That's it's probably around like 5 hours at least. Mental math is not my forte, but I'm pretty sure that that's the case. And what that results in is Obviously that's 5 hours or so, at least, of work that didn't get done because I wasn't doing work. I was watching a TV show. And I've also learned that if you're going to relax, if you're going to decompress, if you're going to have some input instead of just focusing entirely on output, it's best to just do that wholeheartedly. It's best to do that in a manner that will remind you to be guilt-free, if that makes any sense. What it results in, 99 times out of 100, right? 9 times out of 10, is you genuinely enjoying some aspect of whatever it is you are engaging within, whatever it is you are consuming. Just like if you sit down before a meal and you really appreciate the fact that you've got this food, and it increases the benefit that you get out of it. It increases the flavor, perhaps, or it helps you notice that. It increases your psychological state, improves your psychological state regarding it, and so on and so forth. I think if you just allow yourself to watch a show, in this case, it will help you to genuinely get a better experience out of whatever it is you're consuming, and also to not, again, beat yourself up over not doing something. This is a problem that was a little bit tougher for me to solve as I became very, very productive in the past 2 or 3 years. I realized, wow, I'm starting to give myself shit in a passive sense for not doing work in every waking moment that I can, especially as my time has become more of a hot commodity lately. Spending 5-6 hours a week on television seems almost unthinkable, but I think it is important to find stuff that inspires you, and you can't really do that if you're always working. So, not that Altered Carbon in this particular case was inspirational. I would say it inspired a different kind of element. It inspired my critic, more so than my science fiction fan. But that subroutine was running, that's for sure, and I was getting something out of it. It was stimulating me in a way that it was making me really ask basic questions and wonder why none of the scriptwriters asked those questions, but it was still stimulating me. It was something different. It was a very different experience, and in a way that was its own level of therapy. It was its own level of enjoyability. Came from that. Came from taking in somebody else's completed work, in this case many somebody else's, and the work of many other people, and that's what I was taking in, and I was analyzing it, and I was doing that so very silently, very focused, in a focused manner. I think that helps. I think it helps to shut everything else out, especially with these new headphones I got. That's very easy. Shut everything else out. Don't worry about, focusing so much on the work that you have to do, and the work that's expected of you, and just find some time to experience somebody else's work. Now and again, that can be very helpful. And especially in a way where I'm not live streaming it, right? I'm not commentating over it in a verbal sense. I'm not constructing my thoughts for an audience. It's just me and my computer, and that's what I'm looking at. That level of focus and detachment is very helpful, and something I'm realizing I'm not really getting very often. I don't know how frequently a good balance would be to strike that. I think it would probably vary and just depend on my mood, but I think I will be trying to work that into my, my metaphorical diet, I suppose you could say. Just to balance my time across input and output a little bit more, again, balanced, right? And to actually balance my time at all. I think that might end up helping in this case. And that was the other aspect of this whole balancing your time and not beating yourself up over not working all the time or not doing what you said you were going to do. In some cases, it's been healthier for me to conceptualize the day's agenda as a series of goals and just to attempt to knock as many of those goals off that list as possible before the end of the day. And then some stuff is going to spill over into the next day for sure, but or perhaps the next week even, or the next month, or so on and so forth. And how long have I been chomping at the bit to get some work done in Unreal or some work done on my video essays? And that still has not happened. Well, on some level, it's because I haven't worked up the willpower to do that. on another level, I'm working towards that every day that I do these classic FPS game streams, because I know that once we're done with those, that time will be carved open for the Unreal tournament, or sorry, the Unreal development, Unreal Engine stuff, as well as the video essays and so on and so forth. So I think that's one example anyway of me being able to move past that. And I also think that there's quite a bit of you miss quite a bit of some sort of experience if you are always working. And maybe part of that is just you miss the ability to say, fuck it, I'm going to go watch a television show or a movie or whatever. I'm going to play some games. I find I don't do that as often, mostly due to the quality of the games that are on the market. But finding something to occupy your time for a fair amount of time and that you can focus entirely on, I think is a healthy way to go about your day in a way that doesn't mandate or necessitate that you do as much work as possible, or that you work every single second that you're awake and that you can, and awake and at your computer. It's an unrealistic standard to set, and one that subconsciously or otherwise I was setting for myself back in 2017, 2018, when I got a taste of what it was like to be very consistent. I perhaps part of it was me latching on to it too long and saying, I'm finally consistent. I'm finally doing this stuff all the time. Can't stop now. If I let my foot off the pedal there, it's going to be all gone. I think being able to look past that was helpful. And then, even beyond that, more recently, realizing that it's okay to eventually allow this modding streak to break. I'm not going to do it anytime soon, I don't think, but eventually it will, and being okay with that is fine as well. It's a sort of extrapolated version of the same problem of letting your foot off the brake and easing off the pedal. Letting your foot off the brake, on the brake, pumping the brakes. This analogy has driven away from me. So I'll drive away from you. That was basically my core message anyway, is if you are working yourself to the bone, and you don't have to be working yourself to the bone, I would suggest you stop working yourself to the bone, even if it's only temporary. You might be surprised at what you end up finding as a result of all that. And with that, I bid you adieu. It is bedtime right after I fold that fucking laundry. Bye.